Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andriy Shevchenko, and on behalf of the team of Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum, I want to thank all the journalists who tell the world about our fight for freedom. This time we will be talking to Mr. Yurii Sobolevskyi, first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council. Mr. Yurii, what are the hottest news on your end? Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. As to the news, the security situation is still complicated. The shellings by the enemy are still going on. We have less strikes these last days. However, unfortunately, today we have 3 persons injured. Within the last 3 days, it was 10 people injured, some of them heavily. The doctors are working to save the lives of those injured currently. After the stabilization of their condition, we try to perform medevac in the fastest manner possible so that the people are being treated by the medics in other regions, in safer regions. So what are the targets of those shellings, and what weapons does the enemy use for shellings? They use the cannon artillery, MLRS, mortars. Sometimes there are missile strikes, and not every day, but sometimes there are locations where orcs shell our facilities using tanks. What is the distance? What is the distance for those who know the geography of your region wars? What is the distance that the enemy shoots from? So the most of locations are on the banks of Dnieper, so it's 1 kilometer, kilometer and a half to the other bank, and sometimes the enemy shells us from 15 to 20 kilometers, and unfortunately the time between the launch of a projectile until its arrival is very short, so people almost don't have time to move to the shelter. So this is the situation we're having. So it means that since the moment that the people know about this hazard, it's just a matter of seconds that people should hide, should take shelter in place. Yes, that's true when we're talking about the missile strike, when the air defense forces report about the hazard, and we have this option of switching on the siren to warn the people. But when we're talking about the cannon artillery shelling, it's just a matter of seconds between the launch and the arrival. Do we have questions in the studio? Good afternoon. There are reports that on the occupied territories, the Russian occupiers shut down the medical institutions. Do you know any information in this regard? And my second question is, how is the situation with the food products in Kherson? Can people buy anything? And where are there any general stores operating or markets? Well, the humanitarian situation in our territory, in the deoccupied territories, is more than satisfactory. The people have access to medical services, they have access to government services. Recently, the Agency for Registration of Civil States started operation, because recently it was not so convenient to go to Mykolaiv for registration. Now people can do it right in Kherson. Also, the access to food products is free, is easy. The supermarkets, the markets are operating even regardless the difficult security situation. We don't have issues with that. As to the occupiers shutting down the medical facilities, yes, we have confirmation of this information. There were 7 of such medical institutions shut down on the occupied territories. They will be transferred to Khanychevsk and Novotroitsk and transformed into the military hospitals. And according to the last information I have, the occupiers are trying to transform all the government institutions from the 15-kilometer zone from the bank of Dnieper. They will be moving those institutions to Skadovsk and Henichesk regions. So unfortunately, the humanitarian situation in the occupied territories deteriorates significantly. The people are being limited and restricted their access to the medical services, and there is still very strong promotion for people receiving Russian passports and move to the Russian Federation. Any more questions in the studio? Well, I have a question. I've heard that the defense forces stopped the disembarkment of the enemy forces on one of the islands in near the banks of Dnieper and Kherson region. Well, one of those Potemkin islands, we keep the information silence regarding everything that our military does. And in the same way, regarding the activities of the occupational forces, I know that the control of the equator of Dnipro is being exercised on the constant basis because such disembarkments and terroristic acts and provocations by sabotage groups is a frequent case. We understand it very well. Our military understand it very well. The activities are being undertaken. I cannot say what kind of activities, but they are in progress on identification and elimination of such sabotage groups. Such information will be promulgated formally by our military. Well, we don't disclose anything that our military wouldn't like us to say, but our colleagues that monitor the Russian information space, they say that there are more talks about the counteroffensive of the Russian forces in the Kherson region. So are we talking about the psychological warfare, or you see any signs of this? Well, we understand that clearly it's a war. We see certain accumulation of occupational forces in the left bank of the Kherson region, but is it a preparation for probable counteroffensive operations? Again, it's only our military who understands it, so only they can comment it. Most likely, or more logical, so to say, is preparation of the offensive operations in Zaporizhia rather than cross Dnipro. They hardly crossed it when they were fleeing from the right bank of Kherson region. So now undertake such an operation with crossing Dnipro, I don't think that they have such options, such opportunities now. But I think that Zaporizhia is a more dangerous direction of enemy offensive, but I think that our military understand it very well, and the orcs are not about to make it. So how is life in Kherson now? How do you maintain the infrastructure? How do you cover the basic needs of the population? How's life in Kherson now? Well, the life conditions are more than satisfactory. It's pretty comfortable, but in terms of security, we hear the explosions on a permanent basis. We had 102 shellings per day recently, so in conditions like this you cannot probably keep calm and live your life to the full. But our people are real resilient and unbreakable, so the life is going on. And we keep emphasizing that voluntary evacuation is a probable solution now, is the best solution now, because the hazard is really high, which is posed even with the mining that the orcs left after themselves. And after these shellings we will reconstruct everything, but now the best solution is probably to leave. Well, the general stores are operating, the medical facilities are operating, the state emergency service keeps working, and we try to launch some government services because we understand that people who stay in Kherson, we understand that we should provide the most comfortable life possible for these people because don't seem to be about to leave. So our municipal council takes relevant resolutions. We increase the number of concrete shelters that we install all around the city. It's a very small number of them for the time being, so we want to expand. We want to bring it to up to dozens of such shelters so that people can keep their life and safety during such artillery shellings. What's your evaluation? What's the fraction of the population of Kherson still remain in the city? Well, I would say probably about, well, we were talking to Yurii Sobolevskyi, the first deputy of the Kherson Regional Council. We were discussing the security situation in the region. Oh, Mr. Yurii, yes. So if you have any figure, any evaluation, we can hear it now. Yeah, the connection went off. So to talking about Kherson is 50,000 people, about 50 to 100 live on a daily basis. Some people live by themselves, but we don't see those figures. We just analyze the data by the cell network carriers, and we estimated by the number of those who receive humanitarian aid to evaluate the number of people who still remain in the city to plan our activities. So it is five. It was 320, 330,000 before the war. Now it's 50 to 60,000, and so yeah, this figure, it can give us an impression of the situation of the city. We were talking to Mr. Yurii Sobolevskyi, first deputy head of the Kherson Regional Council. So follow our announcements and stand with Ukraine.